I'm in Tallinn for a couple of reasons, and I'm really glad that we got to connect so that I could be here today. So yeah, among many things, I've worked on the movie Snowden. Why don't I start at the beginning? For me, computers were a hobby when I was 14 years old, just a couple of years ago. And it started really as with ham radio. And then a friend introduced me to ham radio, and then from there, this thing called phone phreaking. This is way back in the day before the internet. And that was just manipulating the phone system to make free phone calls. But when you're 14 and you can make a free phone call to anywhere, who are you going to call? You don't know anybody. So a little later, I found out that with a computer and a modem, I could dial these things called BBSs, or bulletin board systems. And again, this is pre-internet. So I decided I'm gonna go get a computer and a modem. And so I asked my mother for Christmas to get me a Commodore 64. Anybody know what that is? It's an ancient computing device. And so I did. I got this computer. And interestingly enough, and I know this is going to sound funny, but at 14, the motivation was that I was told there was porn on BBSs. So I said, oh, really? Well, then let's go get some porn. Interestingly enough, it was very slow at the time, and computers used monochrome monitors, so orange and black. And it probably took about 20 minutes to download a picture. You're looking at it going, I wonder what that is. And 20 minutes later, you go, oh, I don't like that one. So that was the original reason to get a computer and a modem. And without me realizing it, I was actually learning about computers. And on these systems, I met other hackers. And it was the first time that I actually was able to kind of connect to and say, oh, okay, well, I understand now that this is what I am, right? A hacker. And so I'll read you guys the very first thing that, and we'll talk more about what I believe hacking really is, but pull up my trusty little friend Google here, and look at that, it's an Estonian. And have any of you guys ever heard of something called the Hacker Manifesto? Anybody? No? Oh, all right. So this is going to be new to you. This was the first thing that this was a hacker magazine, if you want to call it that. It wasn't really a magazine. But I read this same thing here on a bulletin board system in 1989. And it said this: another one got caught today. It's all over the papers. Teenager arrested in computer crime scandal. Hacker arrested after bank tampering. These damn kids, they're all alike. But did you, in your three-piece psychology and 1950s techno-brain, ever take a look behind the eyes of a hacker? Did you ever wonder what made him tick, what forces shaped him, what may have molded him? I am a hacker. Enter my world. Mine is a world that begins with school. Interestingly enough, I'm smarter than most other kids. This crap they teach us bores me. Damn underachiever, they're all alike. I'm in junior high school or high school. I've listened to a teacher explain for the 15th time how to reduce a fraction. I understand it. No, Mrs. Smith, I didn't show my work, I did it in my head. Damn kid probably copied it. They're all alike. I made a discovery today. I found a computer. Wait a second, this is cool. It does what I want it to. If it makes a mistake, it's because I screwed it up. Not because it doesn't like me, or feels threatened by me, or it thinks I'm a smartass, or doesn't like teaching and shouldn't be here. Damn kid, all he does is play games. They're all alike. And then it happened. A door opened to a world rushing through the phone line like heroin through an addict's veins. An electronic pulse is sent out. A refuge from the day-to-day incompetencies is sought. A board is found. Bulletin board. Remember, that's what they were called back then. This is it. This is where I belong. I know everyone here. Even if I've never met them, never talked to them, may never hear from them again, I know you all. Damn kid tying up the phone line. They're all alike. You bet your ass we're all alike. We've been spoon-fed baby food at school when we hungered for steak. These bits of meat that you did let slip through were pre-chewed and tasteless. We've been dominated by the sadist or ignored by the apathetic. The few that had something to teach found us willing pupils. But those few are like drops of water in the desert. This is our world now. the world of the electron and the switch, the beauty of the bod. We make use of a service already existing without paying for what could be dirt cheap if it wasn't run by profiteering glutens, and you call us criminals. We explore, and you call us criminals. We seek after knowledge, and you call us criminals. We exist without skin color, without nationality, without religious bias, and you call us criminals. You build atomic bombs, you wage wars, you murder, cheat, and lie to us, and try to make us believe that it's for our own good, yet we're the criminals. Yes, I'm a criminal. My crime is that of curiosity. My crime is that of judging people for what they say and think, not what they look like. My crime is that of outsmarting you, something that you will never forgive me for. I am a hacker, and this is my manifesto. You may stop the individual, but you can't stop us all. After all, we're all alike. And so I read this at the tender age of 14, and I thought, that's what I am. I'm a hacker. And so that's kind of how it began. Now, at that point, it was still just a hobby. And it wasn't until much later that I realized that it could be a job. It wasn't even to think that it was a career. So a few years later, at 21, I decided to go into the workforce, and my very first job was as a secretary, an administrative assistant, because I knew how to use WordPerfect, which you guys don't even know what that is. It's like Microsoft Word, and DOS. And got hired by a public relations company, and this company happened to handle IBM. So then I went out and was basically a secretary for a PR company that IBM did events for. And that took me out, and I met real engineers. And what I found interesting was that, they were setting up printers and a network. This is the days of Token Ring. And basically they, I started saying, oh, well, let me show you something. And I would show them how I can make all the printers print out whatever I wanted them to. And they were, wow, that's magic. How'd you do that? I was like, well, you don't know how that works? So it turned out that I knew something they didn't know, and here were high-paid engineers at IBM. And so there it began, and years later, I worked for many different companies, including Oracle for a while, which I had no idea what Oracle was when I went to work there. Then I found out they were actually pretty big. And I've worked for a lot of different companies with a lot of different industries, from healthcare to industrial to you name it, including later on, the internet kind of happened, and firewalls were born. Up until this point, there was no firewall. There was no such thing as a firewall. So, needless to say, hacking wasn't really that hard by a level of complexity when you compare it to today's complexity. So I've now spent 25 years doing penetration testing or vulnerability assessments and risk assessments, forensic analysis, all kinds of crazy stories that I can tell you and I hope to tell you. So the truth about hacking, and this is really what hacking is all about. It really has to do with a mindset, and a lot of times we tend to think, including us, that this is some sort of, like engineering. It's a very logical business or logical way of thinking, when in reality, the one thing that's very different about hacking than any other type of engineering is that it's really a very creative process. It's not just entirely logical, it's very creative. So I have a little exercise that I want you guys to play with me here. I call it the Jack exercises. You guys all know Jack, right? Well, I'm not talking about this Jack. There's a different Jack. Jack the electrician. So you are now all an electrician here. Everybody here is an electrician. And this is a really good exercise that you can even use in the future. And some of you who will work at companies can use this to sort of tell how creative new hires, people that you're hiring, will be. So Jack the electrician looks like this. And it's real simple. There's a light bulb on the ceiling, and there's a switch on the wall. I want you guys to tell me 10 different ways to turn off a light bulb. Okay, so
I can pass the mic? So you just...
Yeah, lift your hand and tell me 10 different ways to turn off the light. Come on. I'll go, the first one's easy. I'll flick the switch. Okay? That'll turn off the light. What else?
Break the lamp. Use the switch.
Come on, I said that one. Another one.
You unscrew the bulb.
Unscrew the bulb.
Break the bulb.
Break the bulb.
Okay, you can just shout for this stuff.
Yeah, you can shout. These Estonians are kind of loud. Cut the wire.
Shoot it.
Watch out with that guy. And still break the bulb. What else?
You can just rip it off. The whole lamp.
Rip up the wiring.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll say that. That's 5.
Take out the bulb without breaking it?
Well, we're good. We can get down that path, but yes, okay.
Overcharge the bulb.
Okay, so overflow the electricity and that'll break the bulb.
If you wait enough for long, it's anyhow.
If you do nothing, it'll eventually stop working. Yes, but that's true.
Stop paying the electric bill.
That works every time. And so we got about 8 here.
Ask someone else to do it.
Ask someone else to do it.
Cover the lamp.
Cover the bulb. Okay, so the point of this is usually when you ask a question like this, you come up with the first 5 very quickly, right? You'll come up with turn the switch, break the bulb, rip out the wiring, overload the electricity, cut the electricity. One that most people don't think about is add a brighter light source. So if you have a 20-watt bulb and you put a 120-watt bulb next to it, you're not going to see the 20-watt bulb. Does it turn off the light? Depends, because we can only gauge depending on what we can see, right? And that is part of what's different in hacking. We have to gauge beyond what you can see to what you can't see. Like you said, wait until on its own it'll die. Don't allow anybody to touch it. Ask someone else to turn it off, which in hacking we call that social engineering. And I'll tell you a story about that. Cover the bulb. Yeah, somebody said that. Close your eyes. Unscrew the bulb. So yeah, there's definitely more than 5 ways. But we always come up with 5 ways. So, think about somebody who come up, I need to hack a password. There's at least 5 ways, if not 10. So you always have to think about what are the different ways that you could do this. And this makes you go through this analytical process, yes, but it's also a creative one. So you have to think about, all right, once I figured out or thought about 10 different ways to turn off a light bulb, then you get into how does a light bulb work? What are the 10 components that make a functioning light bulb work? And then you go, okay, glass, filament, and electricity, and wiring, and and then you come up, again, the first 5 are very easy. But you got to get deeper into the process, and the deeper you go. Then once you've got that, then you go, okay, well, how can I tell if the light is on or off? So obviously looking at it is one thing, but feeling it, right? It does emit heat. So asking someone else to do it, and usually, again, as you go deeper and deeper, you start coming up with less and less number of things. But always think that there's probably 5 you're not even thinking about. Once you've really gone deep enough to go into that process, then you can really think about, well, what are 10 different ways to stop somebody from turning the light off? And that's cybersecurity in a nutshell. Because you can't really be thinking about how to prevent someone from turning off a light if you don't even understand how a light works. That is the biggest problem with cybersecurity today, is the majority of the people who are dealing with these issues don't even understand how half the stuff that they're talking about works. Especially the upper level management and the executives in most of these companies, they've never done penetration testing. They've never done they may have gone to school at Harvard, but they certainly have never touched a computer in the ways that we've touched a computer. So one easy way that I like to explain who are hackers, because people go, oh, who's a hacker? Well, there's 4 different kinds of people in the world. That's it, the whole world. I don't care if you're from Estonia, from Los Angeles, from you name it. There's only 4 kinds of people in the world. You're neither someone who knows and does, know and do person. You're a know but don't do person. You're a don't know and do person. Or you're a don't know and don't do person. Okay, so that's it. Everybody in the world is falls into one of these categories of people. And the two that are often referred to as hackers, or that have the hacker mindset, are basically the people who know and do, and the people who don't know and do. Because in fact, if you look at the definition of a hack or a hacker, on one side in your dictionaries, you'll see that it says an expert at programming and solving problems. And on the other side, it says a person who engages in something without skill of any kind. So wait, is it an expert, or is it somebody who doesn't know anything? It's both. And the thing is, you will end up with the screwed up robot over there when you start. But the more time you spent and the more time you do it, the more you're going to end up with a nice little working robot, right? So this is what hackers have in common. They do. Now, the motives have changed drastically, and this is actually a little video, but it ain't going to play up here. It's kind of a funny video. And I call it old school hacking, and here's where we go into social engineering. But basically, this is, this guy comes up on the door, and guy opens the door and says, "What's the password?" The guy goes, "I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the guy goes, "No." And he goes, "Well, do you have a dog?" The guy goes, "Yeah." He goes, "What's your dog's name?" And the guy tells him the dog's name. And he goes, "Well, is it Buffy?" And he goes, "Yes, come on in." And so it's a funny thing, but it is old school hacking because it's ultimately social engineering, which is hacking the person, right? It's hacking the psychology of people. And we are the weakest link of all, the people. You can secure the technology, and you can secure to a degree, and you can secure the processes, but you have to secure the people too. So there's three things: technology, process, and people. The people is the hardest thing to secure. The technology is the easiest thing to secure. That's the truth. But who uses technology? People. So it doesn't really matter how much you think you've got the technology secured if all it takes is for one person to hit yes. Do you want to allow this? Yes. Now that's most people. Most people will not even know what these messages are saying. Take, for example, you go to a website, and the website has a SSL, the little lock, and it prompts you with, "Hey, this SSL certificate is not valid, blah, 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 blah," right? My mother would go, "Yes." Because if you hit no, nothing happens. If you hit yes, then it goes to the website, right? So that's a very easy way to hack a banking website, is through man-in-the-middle attacks on SSL. But there's many, many different kinds. So there's really a lot of different problems with cybersecurity, and obviously the people are one of them. The fact that, let's just say 10 years ago, there wasn't really even numbers around the cost of a hack. And now there are numbers around the cost of a hack, and it's expected that we're going to reach $1 trillion in losses related to computer hacking. Now, that brings up the issue of motive. In cybersecurity and hacking specifically, back in the day, my motive was porn. Not really going to do much with that, okay? Just a little bit. But the truth is, it really was all about just curiosity. And it really was, could I do that, right? The very first virus, if you want to call it that, which happened on ARPANET, which is prior to what we know as the internet, but the early days of the internet, was a virus that was just written by a guy who wanted to see what it would do. And it happened to bring down 90-something% of ARPANET, which at the time was a couple hundred computers, but it did work. And needless to say, that was just the beginning of being able to show that there were problems with the way we use the technology. Remember, all of this was created for everyone to use openly and freely. It was not intended to be not used freely or not used openly. So we've been battling with that for years and years. And it is now something that is costing, ultimately in so many ways, down to you. Another is the fact that now we're dealing with the growing digital landscape, better known as the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things means everything, and everyone is now going to have at least one, if not 10 different things that are connected to the Internet. at your home. In the next few years, with automation being everywhere, you know, your oven is going to be connected to the internet. This increases the number of devices, not to mention the fact that most of these embedded technologies are rarely updated and upgraded the same way we would upgrade our, say, laptop. So, and I'll give you a little story. So, you know, I was called in on a forensic investigation to a military site in the U.S. where they thought they'd been hacked. There was some weird things happening on their network that they didn't understand. So, came in and looked at the traffic with a sniffer and looked at traffic for a while and sat there for 3 or 4 days watching all of their traffic. And then we saw some interesting things. At around 2 in the morning every night, a printer, a big multi, you know, one of those printer copier things, was basically talking to all of the main servers and taking a lot of data back and forth between those servers. No printing, nothing was printing out. Okay, and as we started investigating further, we found out, well, all of these embedded devices now have a hard drive in them. And that hard drive, or enough memory, but in this case a hard drive, most of these embedded devices are running embedded Linux or embedded Windows. And so in this case, this embedded device running embedded Linux, a copy machine, was taking images, basically making a snapshot of the servers and copying it onto the hard drive on the printer. So it had basically backups of all of the servers inside of this military facility on this printer. And then just miraculously, this printer would happen to break every week, and the service company would come and pick up the printer, change the hard drive, come back and then put a new hard drive. And this is how now this place is not even connected to the internet at all. So the idea that just because something isn't connected to the internet isn't vulnerable to being hacked is not true. So many devices, everything's now interconnected. Cisco, the switch and routing company, has estimated that we're going to reach 50 billion connected devices by the end of 2020, which is exponential growth. And then the biggest problem of all, which is what you guys are hopefully going to address, and it is a huge opportunity, is the scarcity of cybersecurity professionals. Scarcity is a word for shortage. There is a massive shortage of cybersecurity professionals in the world. In fact, Forbes magazine recently reported that there's 1 million open jobs in cybersecurity every year that don't get filled. That's how big it is. Almost 90% of all management level positions in cybersecurity go unfilled every year because there isn't anyone to fill them. In the meantime, cybercrime as a service, as it's called, is increasing. Our friends the Russians are the best at cybercrime as a service. Not because they hacked the Trump election or anything like that, but because they have been for a very long time. All the whole credit card fraud stuff, they are the ones that have mastered that. And the truth is, those numbers are far greater than the number of people who are professionally working in this industry. There's a lot of money there, and there's a lot of money here, but there isn't enough people to really address the number of issues that exist. Anyone with literally amateur, anyone, literally a 10-year-old child can go and download Metasploit and start hacking the planet. It doesn't really take much skill, which is kind of what brings me to this. Now, I talked about the very first virus, if you want to call it, which was technically a worm, and that's the Morris worm, which happened in 1988. Robert Morris Jr. Was the son of a professor at the University of Berkeley, I believe, in California, and that gave him access to computers. He, on a BBS, was in contact with a friend of mine who's actually a very well-known name in hacking called Kevin Mitnick. And it was actually Mitnick's idea. As they talked, Morris is actually responsible for how later Mitnick did his big hack that got him busted. But this was the very first incident in cybersecurity as we know it. And if you notice, all the little black dots are incidents. And all of the other things that you see in here from the red and blue are basically solutions or tools that came out to address the incident. So the first incident happened in 1988, and the first commercial firewall was born in 1992. So how many years we had before what would have stopped the Morris worm? Now what that shows is that adoption of security and security tools takes some time. You may have the best invention tomorrow, but that doesn't mean it's going to be adopted tomorrow. Of course, it's not going to take as many years as it took to create a firewall. But a few years later after that, this tool came out called Satan, which was a vulnerability scanning tool for Unix systems. And of course, not only a commercial tool called ISS came out as well. And it was the first security scanner to try to address, well, how do I know that my system has problems? Of course, that same scanner was used by hackers to find problems, right? So targeted mass hacking started around 96. And most of that hacking was because something was unpatched. Someone left something unpatched, which was the majority of the world at the time. The problem with patching then, and still now, and that's when this thing called PatchLink came out, which the problem then and now is that with mission critical servers, you can't just auto-update and run patches without potentially breaking the application. So that's still a problem today. It's okay for you to auto-update on your phone and auto-update on your laptop, but that ain't gonna work if you're on a server. So you first have to test all this takes time, and so it's still an issue. But the main reason that a lot of things get hacked still are because they go unpatched, because somebody has found the vulnerability. It neither is disclosed or a 0-day undisclosed, and then somebody gets in using that vulnerability. Again, that's only based on the stuff you know, because patches only exist for the things that are known. And then you've got Nessus came out. Nessus in 98 was a big deal. It was developed by an 18-year-old French kid in Paris, and it was an open source project that kind of really changed the way that vulnerability assessment was being done. And by this time, the adoption of things like Nessus and hiring consultants as penetration testers became adopted. Now look, since 88 all the way to 96, 98, quite a while there before the adoption of hiring people to do this. In fact, prior to that, just even using the word hacker was always, unless it was being used among people, among hackers, it was a bad word. It was a bad thing to say. In fact, the first time that I ever did I was teaching a class, or supposed to teach a class, at Microsoft in 2000, I'm going to say it was about 2004, 2005. I was one of the first people to write a hacking class for a company called VeriSign way back in the day. And they hired us to come in and do a hacking class at Microsoft. And within 5 minutes of walking in and walking down the hall, security came, took me, and threw me out of the building. Why are you throwing me out of the building? Well, because somebody reported that you're a hacker. So just even the word that. Well, but I'm being paid to be here. You want me to be here. I'm teaching the class. Nope, no you're not. And I literally was thrown out of Microsoft. Years later, they paid me 3 times as much to come back and do it. So it's changed quite drastically. But if you see, the point of this is, the top of this is all network security. And back in the day, which is not that long ago, it was really all about attacking the network. It wasn't attacking the application, it was attacking the network. A lot of things like Slammer, Code Red Hit, all these different types of things. Note that Windows XP didn't even have a firewall until 2004. So the operating system didn't have a firewall. You would have to have a network firewall, but the operating systems didn't have a firewall. And the point is, adoption took a while for certain things to get adopted. But who cares about the network anymore? Because we don't attack the network anymore, we attack the application. Today's motive is the data. Data is king. Data is what it's all about. And while the data does flow over the network, it resides in a database, and it resides over, and it's accessible over a web application. So that is today's focus. All hackers are really hacking the application, the app, right? So, here, same thing. We have the first sort of reported vulnerability that everybody agreed to call one thing in '96, the PHF vulnerability. And then you had all these different technologies from App Shield and Whisker, and then Code Red hit again. The OWASP, the Open Web Application Security Project, was founded in 2001. They're sort of a nonprofit organization that just focuses on everything related to basically web application security. They created the top 10 a little later. In 2004, 2005, my friend Sammy hit a little thing called MySpace with the Sammy worm, and infected 2.3 million people in a matter of hours with the Sammy worm. And interestingly enough, the reason Sammy did this is because he wanted to find a girlfriend. So it made him friends with everybody, was what the worm did. And yes, he did get in trouble for it and go to jail. Sammy lives in Los Angeles, California now, and continues to do interesting hacks, but not illegal, obviously. I think he found a girlfriend. He found a few. Mass SQL injection hit in 2007, and that's really where a lot of this direct access to the data through web applications is focused on, is through SQL injection. By 2009, 2010, it was normal for people to have in-house vulnerability scanning. In other words, your Nessus or your whatever tools you were using to scan your own network. So, from an 88 Morse worm to actual people doing it to themselves, or the idea that you could just hack yourself before somebody else does, it took some time. So, what is going to be the next major incident? Ultimately, the one thing we haven't seen, if I could see a show of hands, how many of you are programmers? All right? Has to do with you guys. Because all these problems on the technology front has to do with poor programming. But it's not always your fault. Because if you learn a certain language and you've been taught to do something a certain way, then you might use a function while you're writing code, and that function is vulnerable. Well, you didn't write C++. You didn't write C. You didn't write PHP. You're just writing in PHP, or you're writing in any one of these languages. So it's not entirely always your fault, but the big thing that has not been yet adopted is what we call secure development or software development lifecycle. Yeah, we've done it for project management purposes, but we haven't really incorporated security into the process of the mindset of development. Development has always been a matter of get it to work and get it out as fast as you can, and we'll deal with the problems afterwards. All those bugs, the number one bug finders for Microsoft for many years were us. If any of you guys remember getting a blue screen of death, as we used to call it on a Windows box, the thing just crashed, that's a bug. So that happened a lot. And they would be like, report this to Microsoft. So they would put things out, because that's ultimately what it is first to market. And it still is a first to market world, even though now, more than ever, there's a lot more of a concern over security. Obviously, because of everything that we see in the news, all over the world, you're hearing hacking this, hack that, hack the other thing. Still, even today, when you consider that 69% of the time when somebody gets hacked, they find out because somebody outside told them, not because their IT department found out. That's because somebody else said, hey, you got hacked because my data is now on the internet. You take I don't know if you guys heard, I think it was 2 years ago, Target, this big American company, got hacked. 60 million credit cards, so on and so forth. They didn't find out because their IT department came and said, hey, we've been hacked. They found out because the credit card processor called them and said, you've been hacked. We've had all these credit cards, all that were processed at Target within this period of time. So this is a big problem. The average time that it takes to resolve a hack, average, is 27 days, so about a month. So if a company gets hacked, it takes about a month, if not longer, to resolve the hack. In certain cases, and this will lead to how I got to Hollywood, it takes longer than that. Usually, the average time that an attacker, a hacker, I like to call him an attacker, is in your network is 229 days before you find out. So quite a bit of time before they can take everything they want by that time. The average cost per company per year is $7.2 million to address these type of hacks. So just some more numbers, you know. So the truth is, and going back to that is, so how I ended up getting into Hollywood and talking about some of the specific things in there was I grew up in Miami, Florida. Weather's a little bit different than it is outside. And when I grew up there, my true love was actually music. I used to do sound, mix bands when I was 14. And then I got married and decided I got to get a job, and that's how I ended up being a secretary, which ended up taking me in this direction, interestingly enough. But I always had this connection with, for some bizarre reason, with the more creative people, and specifically musicians. And through that, I became friends with Bob Marley's family, who happens to live between Miami and Kingston, Jamaica. Specifically, Damian Marley. Anybody know who that is? All right, we got one. So that took me into the studio a lot, just hang out. And of course, now everything's being recorded is on a computer. So I would ask questions like, so where does that song go? Where's the tape? Oh, there's no tape. It's a hard drive. Okay, where's that hard drive? So all this music is going into that hard drive. And how does this Pro Tools thing work? And how does, you know, because that was more the world where I came from. I didn't really want to know how to engineer a session. I just wanted to understand how recording happened and what all this equipment and how it's all connected. And so that was just really something to do. And then I started working with a very large international private intelligence company. That's a nice way to say it's the legal army of the rich and famous. And they handled some crazy things, from kidnappings to, I think I've been hacked by the Queen. All kinds of crazy stuff. And I was doing some of these forensic investigations for them. Why? Because if you were the hacker and you knew how to break in, then when a break-in would happen, it was really simple to figure out how, or faster to figure out how it happened and find the digital evidence. So I got a call one day, and they said, we need you to fly to Detroit immediately. Detroit? What's in Detroit? And they said, well, there's this little rapper guy who works with this other rapper guy, and he's been hacked, and their music is being leaked on the internet, and it's months before the release of the album. Detroit. Little rapper guy? I only know 2 rappers from Detroit. Eminem and, what's his name? Kid Rock. There you go. They said, well, yeah, it's Eminem. I'm like, really? Okay, well, next thing you know, I'm at Eminem's studio, and I'm trying to figure out what the hell's going on. And going back to those numbers, that took about 2 months, and ended up tracking down a 16-year-old kid in the middle of nowhere, Saudi Arabia. That's who was doing the hacking. And it was very, you know, going to the social engineering, the human aspect of it, it was very much, it wasn't that complex. He ultimately fooled somebody who worked very close to Eminem into thinking that they were going to Gmail, for example. Phishing attack. Got their passwords, logged in their email was every single link. Of course, you send it, Dropbox. This is how, believe it or not, even someone like Eminem works. Once the song is done, they put it on Dropbox. And most of the stuff was still there from years before. And so it took a while, approximately $3 million of legal and investigative work to find a 16-year-old kid in the middle of nowhere, Saudi Arabia, who was nothing more than a big fan. All he wanted was an autographed picture. So it's crazy. Now from there, then all of a sudden I became the go-to guy, because the majority of these people who work in the investigative field are usually ex-cops, ex-police officers with some level of technology skills, or ex-prosecutors, ex-lawyers, who, that's the majority of the team. And then you've got a couple of us, specialists. Of course, most of them, even though this is private, you know, you walk into an environment like a recording studio, especially an M&M or any of the likes, and they still feel like cops, you know? Even though you're paying for them to be there, you know, you're not very comfortable with these suits, even though they're supposed to be working for you. So I kind of don't look like a cop and don't feel like a cop, so it was very easy for me to befriend and become friends with these people. And oftentimes they told me things that they wouldn't tell the other investigators. And so I became the go-to guy, and a few months later there was this little movie called Twilight. You guys may have heard of it. It's about a vampire and werewolf and some girl. And Twilight got hacked while it was in production. And so then I flew out to the middle of nowhere in Canada where they were filming Twilight to figure out, what the hell, how did this get out? Because usually in a film, and this was the first time that I ever got to step on a movie set, a $350 million movie set. I knew nothing about Twilight, just so you know. So as I later found out, I found out too much about Twilight. Because they had scenes that had been 140 something pictures, basically screen captures of dailies, what they call dailies, which is what was shot that day, were leaked on the internet. And you know, I had to sit there with the editor and figure out exactly what shot that was on what day from what camera. So that means I had to look at almost everything that was shot for Twilight. And I had lots of questions, like, why is this wolf guy still in the room? I thought she's going out with the vampire guy. Turns out it was a big movie. It was the last of the movies. And that gave me the first time insight to the process of filmmaking. Now at that point, it was still as an investigator. I wasn't part of the movie. I was just there to fix a problem they were having. But that did get me in, and became friends with the director and some of the actors, and because everybody's worried about, especially in that world, about getting hacked. So that brought me to Los Angeles a lot. Between the M&M case and then later Twilight, I had to be in Los Angeles a lot from Miami. And I started spending more time in Los Angeles than I was spending in Miami. Eventually that told me, you know, there's something about being in Los Angeles. You neither love or hate Los Angeles. It's not the kind of place that you're gonna, it's okay. No, you're gonna love it or you're gonna hate it. It's that kind of a place. So I kind of loved it from the beginning. I guess it's just like anywhere, it's about the people around you. And so that's what eventually led me to move to Los Angeles and realize that I thought that there was an opportunity in the film industry, because now everything is digital, right? That camera's digital, and everything beyond that is digital. There are still some people who film on film, but that film is only used for archival purposes. It's transcoded immediately into a digital format, and it's edited in a digital format. And I thought, well, where's the security to all this? And well, I found out there is no security, as I found out during the Twilight case. There's no security, there's no IT department on a movie. Once you start understanding how movies work, started to realize, wow, I think this is a big opportunity here. And that's how I ended up working in Hollywood. But very quickly, I thought I was going to be doing like security work on the film itself, making sure the film didn't get leaked or hacked like Twilight did. And that did happen to some degree, but what started happening more was, and I fought it for a while because I thought, I'm a logical engineer here. I'm supposed to be applying what I know to this. I don't really want to be, I have no interest in being an actor. I have no interest in being a director. I have no interest in being any of those things. I want to do what it is that I do. But very quickly, and I'll tell you this story because it was very, very funny. I have a friend that I knew through the Marleys, and he would come down from Santa Barbara to Los Angeles whenever I was there. And he came down one time, and I was coming back from doing some work at Universal Studios, and he was at this restaurant at the hotel where I was staying. And he said, hey, come on over. And he was sitting with another guy, and came over. He introduced us. This guy, Tomas, and Tomas is from Argentina. I'm Cuban. We spoke Spanish. We're like, hey, okay, we're kicking it. All right, great. I said, what do you do, Tomas? And he said, I'm an art director. I don't know what that is. What does an art director do? And he said, well, I'm an art director on film. I said, still don't know what that does. What does an art director do? So when you watch a movie, everything, the actor and all the actors are the director's problem, and everything you see behind the actors is my problem. So what the room looks like, all that kind of stuff, that's my, wow, production design. Oh, that's interesting, that's cool. Have I seen any movies you've worked on? He's like, yeah, maybe. Very modest. I said, like what? And he's like, Memoirs of a Geisha, Ali, Pirates of the Caribbean. What? You're the art director on Pirates of the Caribbean? He's like, yeah. So the ships and the pirates, yeah, all that's my problem. Wow. And I ask him, how did you get into that? And he tells me this amazing story about Robert De Niro, meeting him in Argentina when he was 21. And I'm like, wow, what a story. And then we talk about this for 20 minutes. And then he turns to me and he says, what do you do? And I go, computer hacking? And he's like, what? And I tell him some more. Then he says, I need your help right now. I'm filming a movie called Savages with Oliver Stone. And there's some hacking scenes in the movie. And I don't know what a hacker room looks like. And I need to make this look realistic. So, all right, well, give me a call. I'll be more than happy to help. Great, we become buddies, exchange numbers, and he leaves. And then the next day, I get a call. At the time I was dating this actress girl, and in Miami, and she was with me in LA. So I get this call, pick up the phone, weird number, and this lady says, hi, this is Sarah Finn with Sarah Finn Casting. We would like you to come in and read for the part of whatever at 12 o'clock. And I was like, you have the wrong number. So she calls back again. Hello, is this Ralph Echemendia? I said, yes, it is. This is Sarah Finn with Sarah Finn Casting. We would like you to come in and read for the part of... You got the wrong number. I don't read parts. I'm not an actor. She says, well, we got your number from Oliver Stone's office. They want you to come in and read for this part. No. You're confused. I'm the real hacker, not the fake hacker. I don't read for parts. She said, well, I don't know what to tell you. We were given your phone number. If you don't mind coming in, I'm going to email you some sides and then, just come in and read. I said, what the fuck are sides? Never heard that. So I hang up. Of course, at the time, my now ex-girlfriend was like, who called that? I was like, Sarah Finn Casting. She's like, my God, that's the biggest casting agent in Hollywood. Like, what are sides? It's like, oh my God, you don't even know what that is? I've never read a screenplay in my life at this point. I've only read books. A screenplay reads very differently. So I now receive this email with 3 or 4 pages of a screenplay, and I'm supposed to read, I've never read one before, so I'm reading the whole thing. The car enters from the left. Da-da-da-da-da. No, you don't read that. You only read your name. I was like, oh, okay. What's my name? Oh, John. Okay, John. Okay, that's what I read. Okay, so I read this, and I go in and walk in there, and there's like 15, 20 people in this lobby of this place, and they're all talking to the wall, which I find very funny. And I'm like, okay, so she comes right out and says, Ralph, we've heard so much about you. Okay, come right this way in front of all these people, and takes me into a room where there's a camera, and there's a guy sitting there, and she goes, you're going to read with him? I said, okay. all right, let's begin. So I go, okay. She has a son in Mexico, blah, 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 blah. Then he talks, blah, 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 blah. We finish. Says, you want to do that again? I go, no. She's never heard that before. I can tell because she's like, no, you don't want to try it in a different way? I go, nope. Can you pretend you're on a keyboard? Sure. She has a son in Mexico, blah, 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 blah. Finish. She goes, okay, would you like to try it? No, I don't want to try this anymore. I told you I am not an actor. I'm not interested in acting. She says, well, I was just told that you had to read. I said, look, I don't know who wrote this, but we don't talk like this anyway. Whoever wrote this, hackers don't talk like this. She goes, so what do they talk like? I go, I don't know. I've got 3 pages. I don't even know what is going on. I said, okay, well, what would you say? I go, I don't know. I'd come up with something else. I say something technical. She's like, yeah, keep going. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, great. So now I leave there, I remember walking out and at the time my girlfriend, I was like, is that what you have to go through? That's an audition? She was like, yeah. I'm like, I will never do that again. That is not for me. So I went back to the hotel and about an hour and a half goes by and I get another call. And now this guy says, different number. Hi, my name is so-and-so. I'm Oliver Stone's assistant. Oliver would like you to come in this afternoon. Okay, what's the address? He gives me the address, I hang up. Now, if you guys don't know who Oliver Stone is, there's a little movie called Scarface. He wrote that movie. He also directed, I don't know, about a dozen other movies, including Natural Born Killers, Platoon, all these big movies. He won an Academy Award for this and that. He's also a very interesting individual. He's a bit of a rebel. He's not your typical studio director. He questions everything, including the government. He wrote JFK, a whole bunch of different things, right? So he's kind of a legend in the world of film. So I now go to this office, and I'm looking at all these posters, all these movies. There's a movie called The Doors. Anybody know The Doors? He did that movie. So there's Jim Morrison's head is standing right there. I'm like, wow, this is cool. Oliver Stone's office. What the hell am I doing here? And a few minutes later, he walks in. Oh, Ralph, I'm so sorry. I'm late. Now, between that time, I've been talking to his assistant and this other guy. And okay, so now he takes me into the office. We sit in this round table, and there's this producer guy himself and myself. And he says, I said, we actually have met, and we talk about how we met before through Damian Marley, and we talk about that for just a few minutes, and then he goes straight into journalist mode, which is really what he is. He's very much an investigative journalist. So he starts asking me questions about hacking and computers and this and that and the other thing. And this is going on now for about 20, 30 minutes, and it feels like you're being interrogated by the KGB. At first, you're like, wow. And then after like 15 minutes, you're like, okay, I'm done with this interrogation. So I stop him and I said, okay, look, Oliver, I'll answer one last question for you, and then I have a question for you. So on top of that, I actually want to tell you what my favorite scene is in Scarface, because you wrote Scarface. And he goes, yeah. I go, and I'm Cuban, so I have to tell you my favorite scene in Scarface. And after I do that, you're just going to be Oliver. He said, okay, what's your favorite scene in Scarface? Oh, there's a scene when he's all messed up, and he says, I always tell the truth even when I lie. I was like, that's a damn good line. He goes, I know, I wrote that. I go, I know. Now, with that being said, can you tell me what the fuck I'm doing here? And he looks at me and he said, and this is why I wanted to tell you a story. He gets up off the, it's a round table like this. He gets up, starts walking slowly and says, you see, Ralph, filmmakers are like gypsies. And, we move around and we're always kind of constantly going places and moving places and trying to find things. But sometimes we gypsies, we get together. And when we get together to make a film, to make a movie. And when that happens, we become family. And then he puts his hand on my shoulder and says, I would like you to be a part of my family. And I'm looking out going, dude, you had me at hello. I'm not sure what you want me to do, but I'm confused. You know, somebody called me and asked me to read for some, I'm not an actor. So then it all starts to unfold, and he tells me, oh, yeah, Tomas told me this, and da. And we've got this movie called Savages. Now he continues to go and tell me and sell me on helping. Look, you're going to work with these great people. Benicio del Toro, Salma Hayek. I was like, stop right there. So if Salma Hayek's involved, I'm in. And he goes on to show me all of these different, you know, big actors that we've all seen movies of, and tell me about Savages, you know. So now the producer gets into it about, you know, how much it's going to cost and da-da-da-da-da. And she says, I need you to read the script right away because you said some things and it's true. I said, what things? He said, who the hell wrote this? Remember when I was doing the reading? He was like, I wrote that. And I was like, oh. Well, I'm sorry, but he goes, no, but you're right. I don't know what I'm writing. I'm just a writer. And I don't know what I'm writing, especially when it comes to computers. So I do need your help. So he calls his assistant to get me a script. Now, I still live in Miami, and I'm flying back to Miami the next day. So I said, okay, great. It's probably a good idea if I get your phone number, and if I get your assistant's phone number, because everybody has assistants here, and the producer's number. Great. So I make him write down his cell phone number and their cell phone number, and I get it. And I'm sitting there, you know. So now Evan, the assistant, walks in with the script in his hand, and right as he's walking into the office, his cell phone gets a text message from the producer. And the message reads, I know we both have girlfriends, but I've seen the way you've been looking at me. Just come out and tell me how you really feel. Now, of course, that was not the producer. That was me. I text spoofed the assistant from the producer with the gay message. And so he walks in, and he's kind of like looking at the producer like, what? You know, and he gives me the script, and I go, hey, Evan, could you please show Oliver what he just texted you? And then it hit him. He was like, oh, it was you, wasn't it? So he gives it to Oliver. Oliver looks at it and goes, what's going on here? He goes, of course, the producer has not seen the text message yet. So he's like, I didn't send him that. I was like, yes, you did. It says right there, that's your phone number. So we had a little fun with it. And needless to say, just a little while later, I was now on set as crew filming Savages, which was a whole other movie. Now, we filmed Savages, and after Savages was done, Oliver had an interest in what was happening in the digital world and privacy pre-Snowden. Snowden had not come out yet. Okay, the Snowden disclosure had not happened yet. So I said to Oliver, there's a lot of stories in that world. Why don't you come out to DEF CON with me? DEF CON is a hacker convention in Vegas. It's happened for 24 years now. It's not a technology convention, it's a hacker convention. So he came out to DEF CON. We met a bunch of people. It was a very interesting meeting of the minds. And then 3.5 months later, Snowden comes out with what we all know, the NSA was doing and all that kind of stuff. So decided to go that way. So I was there from the very early stages. He went to Moscow and met with Snowden several times. Would come back with these notes, and I chose not to be part of any of those type of trips. It's not a good idea for me. But you know, there was a lot that he did say, and then certain things he didn't say, and I had to figure out how to sort of fill in the picture. So for those of you who've seen Snowden, you know, there's a scene in a classroom. You remember that? And it's supposed to be an aptitude test that he's taken that supposedly he did in a matter of like 38 minutes. It was supposed to take like 8 hours. And he would only, you know, he only gave us that piece of information. He didn't tell us what the aptitude test was. He wouldn't tell us how exactly he did it in 38 minutes. So I had to fill in that. How would I do it, right? And since I used to teach a lot of government classes, I knew kind of how that would go. Oliver also likes to throw his, I was the technical supervisor on the film and was filming in Munich, Germany for 3 months. and Hawaii and DC. I didn't go to Hong Kong. But it was a very, very involved process. Not only was I involved in what the screens look like, what the dialogue is going to look like, and you literally had to stand there next to Oliver through most of the film as it was being done. But on top of that, I was also tasked with putting together the communication system for everything related to Snowden. So that, because we knew we were going to be attacked, we knew people were trying to get access to some of this information, and even the communications between Oliver and Snowden and so on. So it was both, you know, designing and implementing the systems along with my colleague Sean Aries, and then also being on set and going through this entire process of filming the movie. So I got my little cameo in there, so whenever you guys do see it, in that classroom, I'm the guy with the ugly purple shirt, walking around on the prompter. But it was a very intense process. Now, that being said, that brings me to what you guys have the power to do as you're getting into whatever fields in technology you have. One of the things I came to realize is that especially you're more creative minds than you are engineers. Okay, it's not even engineers in the electrical and or industrial sense are still creative people. And it wasn't until I really got deep into this Hollywood thing that for a long time I fought it, and I was like, no, you guys are all crazy. You're just making stuff up. That's what you do. You make stuff up, and then you put it on the screen, and you call that a film or art, theater, whatever. But it's nothing like technology. And I came to realize that wasn't true. So there's a thing called the Science and Entertainment Exchange. It's part of the National Academy of Sciences in the States. And I'm a member of that, became a member of that as part of my work in Hollywood. And one of the things they do is they put scientists together with filmmakers. Why the hell would you do that, I thought, right? And I did this project where they put me in with a filmmaker, and we created an 8-minute short film called Implant, about that in the future humans are going to have an implant and how they can be hacked basically to kill somebody. And that was what the 8-minute movie is called. You can find it online. At the end of this, there was an after party, and I met this guy who was the founder of the Science and Entertainment Exchange, an older man in his late 70s, and his wife. And he said, I'm the guy who started the Science and Entertainment Exchange. I said, oh, explain, why did you do that? And he said, because my daughter had a disease that there was no cure for, and I hired the best doctors and scientists, and I tried to connect them with Washington because it was the only thing that could help her was stem cell research. And the government had banned stem cell research. So I connected them, but the government would never take their phone calls, would never talk to them. But you know whose call they would take? I said, who? He said, me. Why would they take your call and not some scientist? He said, because I'm the director of Airplane, which is a very old 1970s comedy film. I'm like, oh, you're the director of Airplane? He's like, yeah, I'm the director of Airplane, and da-da-da-da-da. He's a director. So he said, that's the power of Hollywood. Scientists, with all their knowledge and all their school and all their stuff, cannot get a government person to take their phone call. But a director can, an actor can. And that's the power of Hollywood. And he said, you're in a very unique place because you're both a scientist and now you're involved in the filmmaking aspect of it. And I said, yeah, but I'm not a filmmaker, I'm more on the scientist side. He said, yeah, but you don't understand the power that you have now being in that position. He said to me, most people think that art imitates life, but that's not true. Life imitates art. What? I thought that when people paint a painting, it's about something that's real. He said, no, it's the other way around. The beauty of Hollywood is we make shit up. We make things up that then science tries to create for real. We can make it look real on screen. It doesn't really have to work. But then young minds are going to go and try to make what they saw on screen work. And if you think back to all the movies that you guys have seen, you always say, we saw it in the movies, and then you see it in real life. So I had never thought about it that way. I always thought that art was something that was imitating life, not that life was going to imitate art. And he said, you know, people are still working today on figuring out how to move this from here to there, like Star Trek. Because somebody came up with that idea that many years ago and put it on screen. So keep that in mind, because when we go into the idea of hacking, is you're all artists. The only difference is that your instrument isn't a guitar or a musical instrument or a camera or a canvas. Your art is technology. Your canvas is technology. Your instrument is technology. But you are really all artists in creating and innovating. That's the true meaning of creativity. And, you know, is creating something. When you code something, when you create something, you hit that and it spits something back out, that's real. Now, music affects millions. It's the universal language. But this affects millions more. That's the crazy part about it. Movies, music, all that stuff, art, affects millions and millions of people regardless of their skin color, nationality, religious bias, all those things that were in the Hacker Manifesto. That's all true. But this affects the majority of the world regardless of what music, language, or anything else is. And everybody's got one of these. So you're all in a unique position, in a good place to do the same thing. You are the creators and will be the creators of what the future brings. So that's my story.